My daughter, Greta, is 3.5 years old, and she is fundamentally interested in questions of authority, boundaries, and authenticity. Of course, she doesn't put it in those terms exactly. Rather, she'll say, "No, Isaac, that's my book." Or, "I don't want tortellini, I want milk and Cheerios." Or, "Do not read the book using funny voices." Or in playing with her best friend, which is, as far as I can tell, much more about setting down ground rules and guidelines, such as, "Now I am the dog, and you are my owner, and we are bad guys who are robbing the house and putting holes in the sofa and drinking juice all day." Or my current favorite, where she asks grown-ups to color in her coloring book, but informs us that the rule for my coloring book is that everyone who colors in it has to color inside the lines. Except me. I am allowed to color outside the lines. Now, you color Cinderella's eyes red and her face and neck green. What I love about Greta's coloring directions is that she so clearly lays out her expectations and preferences, which are that it's fine for some people to color outside of the lines and for some to color inside, and that even if you color inside the lines, you can, if you want, unintentionally transform Cinderella into She-Hulk. And really, we are, each of us, always doing this. At all moments, we are doing this. We are, generally speaking, so well practiced at navigating the cultural waters through which we swim that most of the time, most of us don't even realize it. This morning, let's examine together a facet of each of our lives that is both utterly fundamental to our experiences and is as constructed and arbitrary as the lines in my daughter's princess coloring book. We're going to talk about gender. And it's important to note that I'm speaking here from my own experience as a straight, cisgendered man who has worked to learn more about how gender has impacted my own life and who has worked to be more supportive of trans and gender diverse people. I also apologize in advance for the things that I'm inevitably going to forget or that there just isn't time to more fully unpack. These are complicated issues around which people build whole lives and careers, and a 15-minute sermon just can't hope to be comprehensive. Of all the ways in which we classify and identify ourselves and each other, gender might be the most basic and the most influential. It's the initial split on the dichotomous key of identity, the aspect of self, off of which all others branch away. I had firsthand evidence of this when my wife Sarah was pregnant with our kids, as the first question folks asked on finding out she was pregnant was almost always, "What kind is it?" Or, "Did you find out what it's going to be?" The well-intentioned inquirers weren't wondering if Sarah was somehow gestating a kangaroo fetus or was somehow expecting to deliver a small Buick. Rather, seeking to know the future baby's biological sex was the most direct avenue towards establishing a compassionate connection. While it is sort of weird when you think about it, that so much weight is placed on sex, to me, the real problem is that our culture tells us that gender is a binary, that one is either male or female, that we need to relate to members of the opposite sex. This either-or binary view of humanity leaves no room for people who, for one reason or another, don't fit into one of those two boxes. When you start to think of the many different places where those boxes show up in daily life, such as job and school applications, online registration forms, clothing sections in department stores, public bathrooms, you might begin to grasp the scope of the problems this can cause. And, of course, it must be said that gender nonconforming people face far greater risk of violence and harassment than cisgendered people. That's a word, cisgendered, that you've heard a few times in this sermon, or in this service rather, and I think at this point it might be helpful to offer a few definitions. First, although we often use them interchangeably, gender and sex mean two different things. Sex refers to characteristics of human biology, to the sexual organs and characteristics of our bodies. Gender refers to the social constructs and expectations of behavior and presentation that different cultures have for people with male and female bodies. Cisgender, with the cis spelled C-I-S, refers to a person whose gender identity is in alignment with the biological sex they were assigned at birth. People who have a different gender identity than that which they were assigned at birth, when often, for example, you hear folks say things like, "I always knew my body didn't match with the gender that I knew I was inside." People often will refer to themselves as transgender or trans, but they might also use words like gender queer, gender fluid, agender, third gender, and many others. In addition, there are people who are intersex, who were born with ambiguous genitals or chromosomal configurations that don't fit neatly into those either-or male-female boxes. Finally, there are many cisgender people who choose to dress or otherwise present in ways that are outside the norms of their gender. And really, I would go so far as to say that all cisgendered people, in one way or another, and at different times, dress and present in ways that are outside the norms, not just drag kings and queens. Indeed, my own aha moment regarding gender and the importance of working towards a fuller embracing of gender diversity was when I cast a critical eye to the ways in which I personally did and did not fit the category of masculinity. My own education around gender began in earnest when my family moved out to California and I started my classes at Starr King School for the Ministry, the Unitarian Universalist Seminary in Berkeley's Graduate Theological Union. I had known of people who had a sex change, but it was something that seemed almost exotic and honestly made me feel a little uncomfortable to think about. And so I thought about it very little. Being a student at Starr King was my first experience spending time with and getting to know trans and genderqueer people, and it was an eye-opener. There were many times when I embarrassed myself by using pronouns that didn't fit with a person's self, as Rodney lifted up in that wonderful poem that opened our worship today. There were times when I spoke or thought from a place of unquestioned privilege, where I didn't consider how fortunate I was to be born into a society that values when people's sense of themselves on the inside matches up with the body they have that presents to the outside. One example is that, to my eternal chagrin, I thought it was kind of silly, for instance, that Starr King had made special signs for its bathrooms to indicate that they were open to trans people. I did not yet realize how much I took for granted, that I never had to worry about being accused of using the wrong bathroom or facing harassment or violence for having the audacity to try to take care of my body's most basic needs. And frankly, I'm glad that I made mistakes. Each time I put my foot in my mouth or spoke awkwardly or hurtfully, or failed to consider the privileges I'd uncritically benefited from, I found that I was graciously given opportunities to learn and to grow. I see some of us are familiar with opportunities. That's good. Because then you know, like I do, that they really are opportunities, that these are the cracks that open up through which the light can come through which we can grow in our understanding, through which we can do the work that we need to do to become the people we want to be. I found when I made these mistakes, invariably, I was invited to come back into community with my classmates. As my broader understanding grew, so did my own self-awareness, and I started to see all the ways in which many of the male boxes I'd grown up in and with were truly poor fits, and were holding me back from my calling to ministry and from the more basic needs to connect with others and to express myself honestly in the world. And I developed more and more respect for the incredible courage that I saw in my friends, the unyielding drive that they expressed towards living congruent lives, the courage to bring their inner experience of self into alignment with their outward presentation, the courage to live an undivided life, in spite of the profound disincentives of inconvenience, prejudice and judgment, hate speech and bigotry, violence and even murder. I took heart from that courage and found guidance and strength for my own journey. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and each person's right to engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I wonder sometimes if we don't occasionally lean too much on these principles in order to justify our tendency towards anti-authoritarianism, when those principles are truly a call to develop inward authority in ourselves and in our congregations. We are a people who aspire to be the community we know we can be, the kind of community the world needs. In our gatherings on Sunday morning and throughout the week, we are working to grow in our own understanding of truth, working to more fully perceive the inherent worth and dignity of those around us, working to draw our circle wide enough that all may know themselves to be welcome. In that spirit, I think it's important to say before I close that I don't want to be preaching as though we are one group and we're talking about a them that's different somehow and that we need to work to invite us in. Because frankly, this is us. In our members, in our friends, in this congregation, there are many folks who are transgender or genderqueer, who don't fit into the binary, who reject it in one way or another. This is us. This is already who we are. The work that we are continuing to do is in being more intentional about expressing this truth, more intentional about how we are welcoming, how we encourage everyone to bring the full picture of their lives into this room, into this place, and hopefully further out into the wider world. We are to be an encouraging force. Some small things that each of us can do in our daily lives. First and foremost, don't forget that the people around you are people. I think perhaps the most hurtful word for a transgendered person, or for any person for that matter, is to be referred to as it or that. Words that take the very essence of humanity, of self-determination away from a person. Be open, be curious, be respectful. If you meet somebody and you have questions about their presentation, ask. Ask in a polite and respectful way. Personally, I've found it helpful to just be forthright and say, I'm Andy, it's good to meet you. Do you mind sharing what pronouns you prefer to use? So a simple question can signal that you're open to however a person lives in the world, however they are expressing their authenticity. We can do other things as a larger community. We can think about how we label our bathrooms, how the other ways in which we signal that we are welcoming, that we are trying to be the people we know we can be. And we can work in the larger community too. Much of this work is already happening, but there is always more to do. The most important thing is to remember to honor the experience, to honor the truth of the lives of those around us in whatever form that takes. Because, in closing, we are, all of us, always choosing. We are choosing when we are comfortable coloring inside the lines, choosing when our own integrity demands we color outside the lines, and choosing when we need to just tear the page straight out of the coloring book and draw our own damn pictures to color. We are not, most of us are not 3-year-olds. And so we are called to understand that it is not our place to tell others where and how they are to color. Rather, we are called to see the art of their lives for what it is. We are called to admire our companions on this journey on their own terms. And we are called to always strive to grow in our appreciation, in our love for the vibrant, exuberant, ever more creative collage that we are always co-creating.